Welcome into the Toronto Sports Rush right here on the Bet Rivers Network. Remember to like, subscribe. We got some great content for you right here. And today we got some terrific content. We've got longtime columnist for the Toronto Sun, Steve Simmons. Steve, you were the subject of a lot of discussion yesterday as the Toronto Maple Leafs rolled out their new management team of John Chayka and Matt Sundin, a management team I would say is somewhat surprising, maybe just to put it mildly. First of all, how are you doing today? Because there was a lot of noise around the press conference and around you asking what I think is a fair and tough question.
You know, when you've been around as long as I have, you're used to reactions and explosions and things like that. And yesterday was bigger than I think I could remember experiencing in a very long time. But because of the way I sort of tune out social media, I don't really know that I'm trending, and I don't really know who's saying what or who's saying anything, to be honest. And I do my job, and I do my work, and I do my writing, and that's what I focus on. And I let everybody else have their say, and I don't respond very much to what they have to say. Although yesterday, most of the responses that I received, I can't speak for anything online because I didn't see it, but personally, either emails, text, phone calls, I would say was about 90-10 in my favor of the question. I don't ask questions to get applause. That's not why you do that.
Yeah.
I'm just doing my job as I know how to do it, as I've done it for the last 45 years. And this was just another day, and you don't know when the world's going to explode. And yesterday was one of those days when the world exploded.
Before we get to, I wanted to play the clip for the viewers, but before we get to that, I just wanted to ask you quick, what was it, as you walked into the room yesterday, what was the vibe around that press conference yesterday? Just because it was kind of like, I think most observers, would agree, it was an unusual selection for the Toronto Maple Leafs at this time. What was the kind of feeling in the room?
Um, it was, I can't believe they're doing this. Even though we knew by then what they were doing, it was still, I can't believe they're doing this, and I wonder what today will be like. And I remember one of my colleagues who's been around a fairly long time turns to me and says, "This feels uncomfortable."
Mm-hmm.
And there was a sort of little bit of nervous tension about, the announcement prior to the announcement coming. I didn't feel nervous or tense or anything, but the overall vibe for what was going to be announced, how they were going to announce it, and what happened from there, I think was, it was a difficult day for many people because it just didn't feel right.
Yeah, I think I know watching the beginning seemed very strange. It almost, with Keith Pelley up there, first of all, with those blue glasses, which is, kind of an odd choice. I believe he wears red glasses for Raptors things. So, I mean, I don't know. Everybody's got their own thing. But like it was almost like this cheerleading event where he pointed out to the alumni and asked for applause for them. So it just seemed like a weird vibe from the outside. That's why I asked you what it was like in the room. Now, you made a stir by asking, and again, I think you were going with a straightforward question about, why this was occurring, and the input, the feedback you got from making a number of calls to managers and hockey people around the league. And I know you long enough to know that you make those phone calls. Some people were asking me, well, does Steve really do that? I said, yeah, of course he does. Of course he's making those calls. Of course he's doing that due diligence. And he's been doing it for a long time. So you asked the question. Let's play the clip of the back and forth with you and with Keith Pelley at the presser on Monday afternoon.
Diligence that you did on John prior to hiring him and now hiring him. In the past, say 3 to 4 days, I have been in contact with about 20 people who work in the National Hockey League, many of whom are prominent names that we would all know. And of the 20 people I spoke to, one was supportive of John's hiring, and the other 19 thought it was a sham, to be perfectly honest. Words were used like con artist, liar, salesman. How did you come to a different conclusion that I was able to come to in a very short time?
I must have talked to different people.
That's it? Because I'm telling you, the hockey world today is astounded by this announcement.
Okay.
And your response to that?
Is we've conducted due diligence, and it was deep due diligence, It was a thorough process, and I'm quite happy with where we've landed.
Steve, were you surprised by the way Pelley answered the question? I mean, I would have expected, if I were in his shoes, I would be expecting some tough questions and a question along those lines, and I would have an answer kind of in my mind made up. It seemed like he just wanted to kind of blow it off and move on, and you were sharp to kind of follow up with him.
Well, I asked the question for a reason. Why did you settle on John Chayka if your due diligence was anything like mine, you couldn't possibly have settled on John Chayka. So that was the reason for the question. I'll be honest, in all the years I've been doing this, and I've had a lot of general manager press conferences around Toronto for all the different teams, and I've had a lot of those kind of incidents or just discoveries. And so what you do, especially when you know who it is you start asking questions. I didn't know John Chayka. I didn't know much about him, to be perfectly honest. You ask one person who knew him, then you ask another person, then you text another person. And then what was happening, strangely enough, is I was getting texts from people that I hadn't reached out to who were saying, this is what my experience with him was, or this is what happened with me, or this, different things like that. I had somebody call him, and what was happening is these weren't marginal people, EJ. These were people who have worked in prominent positions or still work in prominent positions in the NHL. And so we're talking about hockey people whose names anybody who knows hockey would know. And I had a long list of people, and I think I talked to about 20 of them. And there was one person who gave John a glowing recommendation, and there were 19 who didn't, or 20 who didn't. I don't know what the number is exactly, but it was incredibly one-sided. And that's why when he said, we did our due diligence, I'd like to know what his due diligence was that was so different from my due diligence. And that's why I asked the question as I asked it. And I picked the words out. And I don't like to break confidences in any way, but I picked the words out of emails or texts that I had received from people in the NHL who described him in different words in different ways. And that's why I asked the question the way I asked it.
Steve, for me, I've been critical of this as well, but it's not. And you just said it. You didn't know John Chayka. I don't really. I interviewed him a number of times when he was with the Arizona Coyotes, so I know him in that regard in a professional, setting. It's not a personal thing. I think, to me, the thing that has really made me really wonder about all this, and I'm sure maybe it's the same for you. I'll let you answer it, but to me, it's the process. I mean, you're the Toronto Maple Leafs. You're the marquee franchise in the National Hockey League. You could go out literally and find anyone you want. That you should, at least from have the financial wherewithal to do an extensive search. They have this. They have Neil Glassberg, who was mentioned in the presser by Keith Pelley yesterday, who represents different people. I found that odd that someone that has a certain bias would be involved in the search. I just think the process, to me, was very flawed, that it ended up with a guy who has been out of the National Hockey League for 6 years and left on kind of unusual circumstances, that doesn't have really a track record of success. Now, he was in Arizona. It was hard to have success there for sure. But you land on John, and then you land on Matt Sundin, who almost seemed in all this like a human shield to me, because he has had no hockey experience outside of being a player and has not been even living here in North America for the last bunch of years. So to me, the process is what really was kind of mind-boggling to me, that how we ended up here.
And I look at the Toronto Maple Leafs similarly to you do. They are the marquee franchise, one of the three. To me, it's the Rangers, the Leafs, and the Montreal Canadiens. They're in a different place than everybody else in the game. They should have the best people running those franchises. They should have the best coaches and the best operations and the best front offices. And because they're the Leafs, you can go out. I remember Brendan Shanahan saying to me once when he was president, we don't have a salary cap for our front office. We have a salary cap for our roster, but not. We go out and do whatever we want that way. and and when they settled on John Chayka, it was like, these are the Leafs, and this is the best you can do. And that's, again, that's playing into the question that I had, that many other people in hockey had. And when it was followed up yesterday with the storm that came after the question was asked, and NHL GMs are texting me and phoning me, and and major player agents are texting me and phoning me, and I'm thinking they have the same questions I have.
Yeah.
Like, they all look at the Leafs and say, that's the job we want.
Mhm.
And maybe because they don't get it or weren't getting it, they saw flaws in everything. But I think it's this is the franchise. And how do you hand the keys to the franchise to someone with no history of success in the NHL?
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't, like I said, the process to me, I find really odd, just to, at best. I mean, maybe for the lack of a better term. What do you make of Keith Pelley? You've been in in the market for a long time there. You've seen different guys come and go. We've seen, I guess, Richard Petty and different, showmen, so to speak, up there take a different approach. What do you make of Keith Pelley? Because he seems to enjoy the spotlight.
Yeah, and it's funny because he's not really good at the spotlight, and
No,
and it's
no.
I almost consider Keith Pelley to be a friend. We've known each other for so long and been around so many of the same events. I'll give you a Kenny Albert story. Kenny Albert is just past all of the broadcasters, doing play-by-play of major sports in North America with the most games ever called. The first football game that he did for Fox, his producer was Keith Pelley.
Wow.
Keith Pelley has a long history in television and a successful
Mhm.
history in television. He is a great guy. I love him sort of as a friend and as a person to hang with, and as someone to have lunch with and someone to talk to, and he's treated me extraordinarily well over the years, and I think most of the time I've treated him extraordinarily well over the years. But there comes points where he has a job to do and I have questions to ask, and that's where the uncomfortable nature of Monday came out. And um and I just think in this instance, this job might be too big for him.
Mhm.
This is a big job. And
Yeah.
so in a little more than a year, he's been on the job about 13 months. He fired Masai Ujiri, who's a legend in Toronto, for bringing the NBA championship here. He fired Brendan Shanahan. He then we fired Brad Treliving. There's a lot of, he's redone the entire soccer team. Like he's had his fingers in lots of pies. And, it's one of those things where sometimes you don't realize that maybe I can't do everything. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not the best person for, years before Tim Lewicki did that job. And Tim Lewicki was like, Jim Brown running the ball in a corporate office. He just smashed into everything. And he hired Ujiri very quickly to run the Raptors, and he hired Brendan Shanahan to run the Maple Leafs, and he basically got rid of all the junk, and he paid big money for some soccer players and won an MLS championship, and I think they lost twice in the MLS Cup, so they had a really good run. Tim Lewicki did, he got the basketball practice court built. There was a lot of good stuff that he did in a very short time and drove people nuts, sort of how he did it, but he was really successful. In Keith's case so far, you're looking and saying, well, the Raptors just had a real nice playoff run, one round, but they played very well and leave some sort of feel that it's promising. But here's what Keith Pelley doesn't understand, and I don't know why someone doesn't say it to him. He starts yesterday's press conference congratulating the Raptors and saying how happy and proud we were, and you guys too, about what happened. Read the room. This is not a Raptors room. This is a group of media, other than maybe myself and one or two others, who don't cover the Raptors.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't care about the Raptors,
Mhm.
and it's like read where you are. You are here to announce your GM. This is a Leafs day. Make it a Leafs day. Don't. But he's trying to bring all of the properties of MLSA into all the properties. And if you watch, it's funny. Sunday night's Cleveland Toronto Game 7. There's Larry Tannenbaum, the outgoing chairman of the Leafs, and his wife sitting courtside right beside William Nylander and Chris Tanev, who I'm sure were on Tannenbaum's private plane flying off to Cleveland for the game. Why else would they have been sitting courtside right beside them? So they want the Leafs into the Raptors, into the Blue Jays. They're all they want all that, whatever the word you use to bring teams together. But yesterday was not the time or the place to say congratulations, Raptors. Oh, by the way, we're naming a GM today too.
Hey, Steve, do you think that they're concerned? Is there a concern about money in Toronto? Because we see the stories about them looking to monetize all these different things, from people riding on the Zamboni, and then they're cutting costs with certain things for the players. They've let go certain people within the organization. They've scaled back. You mentioned Brendan Shanahan, no salary cap on things outside of the players. Well, they're scaling back seemingly on a lot of those other things.
Yeah,
Is money a concern all of a sudden?
Them scaling back is like your next door neighbor who has a house twice the size of yours, deciding this year that he's not going to pay the gardener $1,000 a day. He's going to pay him $900. Like, they're still spending more money.
Yeah.
As the Maple Leafs, they're spending more money on more things than anybody else in the game. No, it's not even close.
Yeah.
What they spend. So if they're cutting back, like, media meals have been cut out, and broadcasters don't travel, and radio broadcaster, it's nickel and diming is what they're doing. But they did fire Masai Ujiri, who had a giant contract with a giant bonus annually based on the worth of the Raptor franchise. And as we all know, franchises in sports have gone ridiculously out of control in terms of pricing. So Masai was getting this giant bonus every year, and it was driving Edward Rogers nuts that we have to pay him this much money. Shanahan was making a very good dollar. So they fire Shanahan, they don't replace him. They fire Masai, they don't replace him. So there's a lot of savings there. The ride on the Zamboni, that's nickel and dime stuff.
Yeah.
And it means instead of having 7 assistant GMs or 6 assistant GMs, maybe they'll have 5.
Yeah.
I remember, as you well do, Lou Lamoriello and David Conti running the New Jersey Devils, basically 2 of them, with scouts and some other people, David Poyle and Paul Fenton running the Nashville Predator. Like, there's a lot of 2 and 3 man operations in the NHL. The Leafs have a director of everything. They have a director of directors.
Yeah.
and so, yeah, them cutting back is like everybody else spending 3 times what they spend right now.
Let me ask you about, just like, he's got the job, right? So, like, whether we agree with the process or whether we agree with the choice, John Chayka is the general manager of the Leafs. Now, I think only a fool would speculate whether it's going to go well or not. We have our opinions. I mean, I guess we can speculate, but only a fool would really say we know. We don't know what's going to play out. We know that he's walking into a tough situation because this is a team that has been a really good team, or a team on the rise for the previous 8 or 9 years. Last year was kind of a disaster for them. That was another thing. I thought they played that press conference like they were the Buffalo Sabres from last year, that they have never won before. I mean, they've had a pretty good team. Like, you could argue the second best team in the league 2 years ago, losing to Florida in Game 7. But all that said, do you think that John Chayka can do the job, which is not an easy one there with trying to figure things out?
I think the job they want him to do is almost impossible. They want him to compete next season. They want him to show Austin Matthews that there's a reason to stay in Toronto, and you're going to extend he's got 2 years left on his contract, and they would hopefully like to even extend that so that they have a runway with great players like William Nylander and like Austin Matthews. But the reality is, number one, Matthews is not agreeing to anything. Number 2, he's not sure he wants to be here anymore because he doesn't know what the team is going to look like. and so your best player, your franchise player, is in some form of doubt as you're attempting to try and win next year in a division where the young sort of quick teams are going in one direction, as we've seen Montreal and Buffalo and and Ottawa and well, Detroit and didn't make the playoffs, but Detroit's pretty close and Columbus is pretty close. Those young quick teams. The Leafs are not young or quick. And in today's NHL, look what we're seeing at night. How Quinn Hughes is changing the games he plays in.
Yep.
Cale Makar changes the games he plays in. The guy in the blue line in Montreal, Hudson, he changes the game. And he makes every one of those forwards better by the way that they move the puck and the way they skate, side to side and all that stuff they do. Leafs don't have one of theirs. Their best defenseman is Chris Tanev. He's going to be 37 in September. And he's not a skate into the play puck moving defenseman.
No.
He's a very good NHL defenseman and who has trouble staying healthy, but he nonetheless is an old guy by league standards. The rest of their defense is somewhat similarly aged. Somebody's 34, a couple 32-year-olds. There's not a 20-year-old or a 19-year-old ready to walk in and become the next, whoever one of these guys are. And the teams that are having those guys, guess what? They're the ones having success.
Yeah.
And so where are you getting that guy from? How are you rebuilding your entire 6-man defense when, virtually every statistic last year defensively, showed the Leafs to be lacking. And John Chayka's strength is numbers. He's a numbers guy. So he's going to look at every number, if he hasn't already, from last season and think, oh my God, do we ever have work to do? And there's another thing in there. You talk about money. Craig Berube is officially the coach.
You read my mind.
He's about
That was my next question.
He's about $3 million a year, which is sort of in keeping with what coaches of higher end get these days. And so they have 2 years left. He had as bad a season as a coach can have this past season. And he's a terrific guy. If you don't like Craig Berube, check your pulse.
Yeah.
He really is a really fine man. First year here, everything seemed to work.
Great.
And then this year, nothing did.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. And you always get a sense, and you've been around as long as I have, and you get a sense when a team is ready to fire the coach.
Yeah.
You watch the team, that looks like a team that needs a new coach.
Yeah.
Whether it was Vegas needing, to make their change they made, or Columbus or whoever made it, Buffalo changing GM. Sometimes you have to, see the moment and you have to understand what the moment is. So now Berube is not the coach who's going to take this team and change it. If they want change.
Yeah.
He coaches one way. That's his style. Whether that can succeed in the NHL right now, I don't know. And I don't know if it can with this group, but they don't want to fire him because they don't want to pay $6 million for him to walk away.
Yeah.
When they're already paying Brad Treliving money and they're already paying other people money.
And that's why, Steve, I asked you about the money situation, because, it's similar here in New Jersey with, they hired Sonny Mehta as the new manager, and Sheldon Keefe is, completed his second year with the Devils. It hasn't gone really all that well. Being in this market, you sense that, that maybe it would be time for a change, but in the end, management didn't fire the coach. They hired the GM. I think it's awfully hard to ask the manager, no matter who it is, to come in and his first job is to fire the coach. I don't think any manager wants to be in that position.
Unless he has a guy in mind. Yeah. Unless he looks out and I said, you know what? I have the next Dan Muse.
Yeah.
I've identified that guy. Now, we don't know. I was in Calgary when in the early years of the Flames, when the Calgary Flames really took a broad step and brought the first American coach to come into Canada. And nobody was bringing American college coaches to Canada. Yeah. And they brought in Bob Johnson.
Badger Bob.
And he changed the franchise. And he changed every player he coached. And he's one of the 5 best coaches I've ever seen in the National Hockey League. Like, to me, if you didn't get a chance to watch this guy or work with this guy or be around this guy, then you missed something, because it was educational for the years that I was around Bob Johnson. And when obviously Cliff Fletcher at the time, the general manager, identified that coach. That guy's going to be the guy we're going to bring in, not an old, if this guy got fired last year, we'll bring him in this year kind of guy, which is what was happening mostly in the NHL in those days.
Yeah.
But Pittsburgh did it this year. They took a guy that really was on no one's radar, and look, he's up for Coach of the Year.
Coach of the Year candidate.
And again, with a team that doesn't make sense to me, but it's had a hell of a season.
Yeah.
And so you don't know what's in Craig Berube's mind, whether he has a guy or not, or whether he's just going to live with next year being bad with Berube. Now, if you want to bottom out and get a high draft pick, but you don't have your draft
But they
pick,
don't have one.
Yeah,
They might not have one. That brings me to this, Steve. How important is this draft lottery to the Toronto Maple Leafs that's going to happen on Tuesday night?
oh my, it's everything. It's their future, because if they don't get this pick, it goes to Boston, and they don't have a first round choice, and they don't have a first round choice next year.
Next year, correct.
The Leafs treated first round picks like they were buying popcorn at movies.
Yeah.
Like it was just dumb management, really. I mean, if you're going to trade a first round pick, get Artemi. I mean, the Kings got Artemi Panarin without giving up a first round pick.
Yeah.
The Leafs got Scott Laughton.
Yeah.
The Leafs got Brandon Carlo.
And the Kings ended up getting Scott Laughton too. They didn't give up a first round pick for
No,
him
but
either.
what I'm saying, my point is, when you
I
make
know what you're
those
saying.
deals,
Yeah.
you can't trade for Foligno, who spends 3 weeks with a back problem on your team, or for Ryan O'Reilly, who leaves at the end of the year. Like every guy they gave up a first round pick for, came and went real fast. There was some bad management going on here with Tree Living and before Tree Living, and a lot of they just wanted to, they were so consumed by winning and thought they were so close that first round pick, like Tampa trades the first round pick almost every year. But when you have all the good players they have, you can get away with it most of the time. The Leafs now don't have anything in the cupboard. The cupboard is bare. There's not a prospect here off the roster that can jump into your top 4 on defense or your top 6 up front.
Yeah.
And look around again. Look around the league and look at Martone. In Philly. Look at young guys like Stankoven and Speedy. There's a lot of 25 and unders.
Yeah.
The Leafs have Matthew Nyes in the 25 and under category.
Yeah, and Easton Cowan, right?
Yeah,
and that's
Easton Cowan. Yeah, so they have 2 players, one of whom I'm sure of as a top 6 forward, and I think maybe both are. But your center is Tavares is turning what, 36 or 37?
Yeah.
In the fall, what was he, minus 25 this year? Clearly he's getting scored on a lot.
Yeah.
Austin Matthews, who's a very, very good defensive player, his offensive numbers have absolutely turtled under the 2 worst scoring seasons he's had have been playing for Craig Berube, who clearly wants him to do some other things. But so you're talking about there's so many things at play here now that I don't know where they begin, because they need in my opinion, they need a goalie.
Yeah.
They need to completely redo their defense so that they can, or maybe even if you get one defenseman of quality, I don't know how you get that, but if you do, like the big guy in Tampa might be worth spending $1 or so on Hradek. But
well, those are the guys, right? Those are the guys. There's going to be a limited free agent market. Who knows if he even gets there? He's got a big shot. He's going to be probably 30 years old coming up. He's not somebody in his early 20s. And he's also not a puck mover really, but he can shoot it on the power play, and he can help you in that area for sure.
Well, the Leafs have had a power play without a point man.
Yeah, well,
and because they've had a power play without a point man, they've often had Matthews or Marner or Nylander, the top of the triangle guy. And when they've played the power play with all forwards, you're taking Austin Matthews, who's an Ovechkin-like shooter, and you're taking him from away from the net.
Further away from the net.
Why would you do that? That made
Yeah.
no sense to me. And I've had this conversation with Leaf coaches over the years. Why is it that this great shooter doesn't score very many power play goals? Like, what's not being set up for him? They should be setting it up the way. Ovi's been scoring the same goal for 20 years, standing
20
in exactly the same spot where everybody in the frickin' league knows where he's going to be, and he still scores it. You're telling me Matthews can't do exactly the same thing if they set the thing up that way? So, but if you put Hradek at the point, at the top of that triangle, with that slap shot, which is top 5 in the NHL,
Yeah, he can hammer it. No question.
and you just say go, every time it comes back to you, you hammer it. Tavares is going to be right on the crease. From in close, there aren't very many players better than him in that tight range hands thing. So you've got Tavares, you've got Nylander, you've got Matthews, you have Hradek. How do you not have a great power play?
Yeah. Well, that's if they can get Darren Hradek, and he may never even get to the market.
He may not get to market, but he's from the area.
Yeah.
Which maybe something he wants or something he doesn't want. And he lost his dad this season.
Yes.
And him and his brother, the family is extremely close.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was the Leafs, I would try and get the brother from the Rangers.
Yeah.
And then try and get to have the two of them play here and make mom happy at the same time.
Yeah, and like they can be helpful players. I mean, Taylor was a good back six forward for the Rangers this year. Certainly, the Leafs could use some help there. And we said Darren Hradek kind of had emerged this year with that big shot from the blue line. It'll be interesting to see, what he decides to do moving forward. Steve, I always love talking to you. You didn't let me down yesterday. You were in the mix, and really, listen, you're doing your job. And I think that's why you've been a great columnist for many, many, many years now, and you'll continue to do that moving forward. I always enjoy reading your notes on Sunday. One of the last really great notes columns that you could find. Check it out if you're, fans, viewers, listeners out there, viewers. You can, Steve, follow him on social media. He puts the stuff out there, and he's got great stuff. And Steve, thanks for the time today. I know you're a busy man.
Appreciate it. And just to say one last thing, when reporters ask hard questions, they don't ask hard questions to be the story.
Yeah.
They ask hard questions to get an answer. And, sometimes I don't word it exactly as I would want to, or it comes out a little differently than I'd want to. But you're asking a question for a purpose. You're not asking a question, so will I be trending tomorrow on whatever you trend on these days? I don't even think in those terms. I just do my job.
That's right. And you've been doing it really well for many years. And I thought you asked a very, very fair question of Keith Pelley in that group. And listen, I'm glad you did, because I don't know if anybody else in that room was going to ask it. So, I'm sure for the fans out there, I know what I've heard and what you've heard, fans are happy you're in that room asking those questions. So thanks for the time today, buddy. I'm sure we're going to talk to you again. There's a lot to discuss, and enjoy the rest of the day, my friend.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Steve Simmons, columnist for the Toronto Sun, right here on the Toronto Sports Rush, presented by the Bet Rivers Network. Have a great day, everyone.